thanks to those who wrote letters to sponsor me for this honor. I do appreciate it. I really didn't know much about this group of distinguished people, but now I'll know more. You've got the red sheets there, and it tells you quite a bit about me, but I'll start with, I was in school at Festus, and then we moved to Herky, and I was in the 5th grade. I had a man teacher, William Freeman, first time I'd ever had a man teacher, and he was my teacher in the 5th and in the 6th grade. And I kept in touch with him throughout his life, and I'd always stop by. He was principal over Roy Taylor, and I would stop by whenever I was home in the summer or something and talk to him, and he was always interested in what I was doing. Let me see. I've got notes, but I can't read them because I don't have glasses. Floyd Thomas was my teacher in 7th grade for English and math. And I had some really excellent teachers in high school, and I had a few real duds. And I know all of you probably have had the same. I started working at St. Joe Lead Company cafeteria when I was in the 8th grade. I was 13. I made 35 cents an hour. I worked from 4 to 8 after school, and then on the weekends I worked, and I think I remember that my first check was $10.15. And boy, I tell you, I needed that $10.15 because we were a poor family, and we didn't have any extra money for anything. So I worked there for Harry and Elmer Fawn. Was a nice couple. He was a tall, distinguished-looking man, and he came in every morning, and he would count the money, and then he would leave. And she was a shorter lady, a little bit heavy, not very much, and she was a French Canadian. And her English was good until she started trying to learn the idioms. And when she would mix the idioms out, it would just be hilarious. We would just practically fall on the floor. But the thing that I learned there from them is that it's really nice if you're working for someone who asks you to do things, even though you know that they mean for you to do it. He would just sort of bark out orders, and that wasn't very pleasant. But she would always say, honey, you want to do something for your country. And then she'd give you whatever job it was that she wanted you to do. So that was something that I learned about leadership from those two. And then there was another thing that I learned working there. There was a man came in one day. We had meal tickets that people could write out a meal ticket, and they would take so much money out of their check. And so this man came in and he said, $21.35. And I just kind of looked at him. I didn't know what he wanted. He just said, $21.35. And finally, my boss said, he wants you to write him a meal ticket. I said, oh, so I pushed the old meal ticket and a pencil over. He said, $21.35. I will never forget that. But what I learned there was that some adults could not read or write. And that just astounded me. You know, I mean, it was only in the 8th grade that I just thought everybody could read and write. He couldn't write his own name, and he would just put an X then on the meal ticket after he'd made it out for him. So that was something that I learned there that I'll never, ever forget. Also, there were a lot of nice guys that worked there. It was all men. And there was a man who was on the school board named Walter Bovero, and he worked at St. Jolette as an electrician. And he would come in, not as much as some of the other guys, but occasionally. And one day he was in and I wasn't busy and we were just chatting. And so he was telling me about he and his wife had a son, but his son died. And he said they had always hoped to be able to see their son in college. And he knew, which everybody down there knew, that I wanted to go to college, but I just had no money. And making $10 a week wasn't any way to be able to accumulate any. And we didn't have transportation to go out of Herculaneum looking for a job. And the only jobs for girls at that time was to work at the drugstore or work down at the cafeteria. So I kept working there, and when we call this man Govey came in and he told me this story. I didn't think too much about it, you know, I mean, it was a sad story, but I didn't think a lot about it. But then in a few weeks he came in and he told me, he said, Barbara, he said, you know, he said, I know that you want to go to college, and he said, I'd be glad, he said, to my wife and I to drive you down to Cape. And I great, you know. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got to Cape, but he knew, and he had called ahead, of course, got an appointment with the president of the college. So when we got there, we went in for his interview, or his appointment, and he told him that about me and that I wanted to go to college, and then we just had no money in the family for that. And so the president of the college gave me a job working in the cafeteria of the dormitory, which was for my room and board. So as of that day, I was going to college, but I didn't have any money for books or anything like that, no, you know, nothing else extra. So the family had a big barbecue for me, and some of my aunts and uncles and different ones who came gave me some money, and that was enough money to get my books. So I went to Cape to start college, and I started out in nurses training. They had a new program down there that was 2 years where you could become a registered nurse. And I liked the program real well, but I couldn't stand it when I had to work on the pediatric floor and there was a child dying, and we knew he was going to die, and it was just a matter. I just said I never prayed so hard in all my life that that child wouldn't die while I was there, because I just didn't think I could stand it. So then I decided to switch from nursing into education. And the reason I tell you this story is that if you ever have a chance to do something like that, something nice for someone, and it, you know, it took one day of their time and probably a couple of phone calls, and it made all the difference in my life. And so I would encourage any of you, if you have the chance to do something for somebody like that, or it doesn't have to be like that, but just something that they would like to do and they just can't see a way forward, please help, because it does make all the difference. I feel like my whole life has been a result of Govey and his wife taking me to Cape. I after I got my degree, my bachelor's degree, Kate got a job at Fox. I was teaching biology and general science, and I liked it very much. But the second year I was looking for more money. So I took a job with a school north of there, and I can't remember which one it was now. But anyway, when I went to sign the contract, the superintendent told me, oh, you know, he had all of these wonderful resumes from everybody, but mine was just outstanding, and that's why he chose me. Well, you know, that sounded great and everything, so I signed a contract and off I went. Well, when I got home, I had a letter from the Department of Defense Dependent Schools offering me a job in Bermuda. So I thought, well, that man had been real nice to me. So I went back to him the next day and I told him, I said, well, I'm not going to be able to take this job in the fall. I said, because I got this job that I've really been wanting with the government. And he said, well, he says, you're not ever going to teach in Missouri again. I said, that's okay. I said, but I'm not going to be here in the fall. And he said, well, that really puts me in a predicament. And I said, well, yesterday you told me you had 5 or 6 wonderful candidates and that I was the best of them. So I said, choose the next best and call them up and offer them the contract. And so then I left, and that was the end of that job. So when I was going to Bermuda, I got a thing from the government saying, you'll just be having one room and you'll be sharing a bath with somebody. So don't take a lot of stuff. Well, they ship your stuff for you, so here comes this truck up to the house. It said hazard hauling. And I didn't have very much to send, but Dad said, that'll probably never get there, Barbara. I said, well, it doesn't matter because I've got the 2 most important things, which was my passport and my golf clubs. So I carried those on, and when I got there, the principal of the school met me at the airport. And he looked at the golf clubs and he said, oh, I'm so glad you've got your priorities in the right order. And I had a wonderful year in Bermuda. And the school was nice and, you know, all went well there. But during the school year, they asked me, would I consider going to Iceland? And I said, oh no, I haven't got any clothes for Iceland, I can't go up there. And so that just passed, and so then toward the end of the year, they came and said, would you go to the Azores? Well, I wasn't really sure where the Azores were, but I said, yeah, I'll go, because I wanted to travel. So my second year, I went to the Azores, and that was a real nice school, and I taught biology, general science. That's usually what I taught most places. Once in a while I'd get in a high school where I taught chemistry and something else, but mostly it was biology and 7th grade life science. So I applied, while I was in the Azores, there was a nuclear submarine that went down, and it was right by the Azores somewhere, but they couldn't find it. And there were probably 3 or 4 dozen bigwigs from the U.S. military who came to the Azores, and they'd go out every day, you know, looking for it and everything, and looking for parts of it, and never did find it. And a couple of years later, there was a biological group that was looking for something, and they found the hull of that scorpion in about 10,000 feet of water. And they were able to get it up, and they said, well, obviously there'd been an explosion, but you know, they couldn't really tell much more than that. But they were just really frantic when it went down because they were afraid, of course, the Soviet Union would get the thing and get all of our secrets and everything. So that was an interesting thing that happened in the Azores. So then I asked for a transfer to Germany because I always had thought I would like to teach over there and travel over there. Well, I went to Germany, and I was assigned to a junior high school teaching 7th grade life science. And when I went in, I had all of these 8th grade science books. So I went down to the principal and I said, somebody has delivered the wrong books to my class. I should have 7th grade life science books, and I've got 8th grade. He said, oh, just give them out. And I said, no, I said, you don't understand. I'm teaching 7th grade life science, and those books are for 8th grade. He said, that's okay, just give them out. He said, as long as the parents see that they got a book, he said, that's good enough. And I said, well, what am I supposed to teach out of it? He says, hey, you'll figure something out. So that year, I just had to wing it all year long, and that was the worst year that I've ever had. And the school wasn't too nice either. It had been a warehouse and then a woman's prison, and then they converted it to a school. So it wasn't a place that I really wanted to go back to more than 1 year. So I applied for National Science Foundation grant. I had had one for the summer before, and I was lucky enough to get a year-long grant. So I went to the principal and I told him, I said, well, I won't be back next year because I've got this science grant and I've got to go to finish my master's. And he said, oh, you can't leave. He said, this is a 2-year area. I said, well, I don't care how many years it is, but I'm leaving at the end of this year. So that was the end of that. But one thing that happened in Germany, I mean, I traveled around a lot on the weekends and stuff like that, but a group of us went to Russia during that year at Easter break. And it was still Cold War. So everybody was very severe looking, you know, I mean, there weren't many smiles and welcoming sort of things. So we got a chance to go to an elementary school. And when we went in, oh, the floors were just shiny like this, you know, and yeah, it just looked beautiful. And there was a little boy walking down the hall, and he spied a little speck of something over the side. He ran over there and got it and picked it up and put it in the trash. Well, the matron, whatever, I don't know what she was called, kind of nodded to him, and he went on to class. So somebody asked her, said, what would you do with a child who misbehaves? And she said, oh, well, we'll call the family. And they said, well, what if he misbehaves a second time? And she said, well, we'll call the family and we told them that they better take care of it. And somebody had the audacity to ask, what about a third time? And she said, we send them to a work camp. And so they said, for how long? And she looked at us and said, forever. And we just almost fell through the floor, you know, I mean, it was just something that we could hardly imagine. But anyway, I went home, finished my master's that next year, and then I got rehired by DOT. And they asked me, they said, where would you like to go? And I said, I'd like to go to Iceland. And they said, why? I said, nobody else wants to go to Iceland. And I said, well, because it's at the top of the mid-Atlantic ridge. You know, you all hear about the Ring of Fire, the volcanic ring in the Pacific. Well, the Atlantic has a big, long line that way down past the Azores and then all the way up to Iceland, and it's volcanic, just the way the Ring of Fire is. And it had erupted up near Iceland and made a whole new island that's called Surtsey. And I just wanted to see that. Well, I went to Iceland, and I didn't see Surtsey, but the volcano erupted while I was up there. And it covered the ash, absolutely covered all the homes, filled in the port, and everything on an island, a small island right beside Iceland. And so a friend and I were sharing a large apartment, and they wanted to have that apartment because all the people had to leave from the island that got covered over by the volcano, and a lot of them came to Iceland. And so they needed housing, and they asked us would we consider going somewhere else. And I said, well, could you store our furniture? Oh no, we can't store any furniture out here. We don't have any place up here to store furniture. And I said, well, could you ship it home for us? Oh no, you don't have any orders, we couldn't ship it home. I said, well, we're going to just stay here then. So we stayed, and a few weeks later we get another call and said, would you consider going to Okinawa? And so my friend and I both said, well, sure, we'll go to Okinawa. So we weren't supposed to sell anything in Iceland because that was considered black market. But the guy who taught Icelandic culture wanted to buy my dining room set, and I said, well, you're going to have to get it past the police, you know, because they don't allow us to sell anything. So he gets the school bus to come over to the house, had all the kids come in, they took the legs off of the table, they whisked it out to the bus, some of the other kids carried the chairs out, and he had the bus driver take that table and chairs to his house. And I saw him about 20 years later, and he said they were still enjoying that table and chairs. So we had other things too that we sold off, you know, even though we weren't supposed to, but we did, and then we went to Okinawa. When we got to Okinawa, we were given one room, share bath, and on the walls when you walked in was written in red, do not smoke. Well, my friend was a big smoker. So I said, well, we are not going to be able to stay here, or else you're going to have to give up cigarettes. And she says, well, we just can't stay here. So I took pictures of everything. It was a terrible place. And all of the plumbing was rusted, you know, I mean, it was just an awful place. So I took pictures, and that was back when you had to get them developed and everything. I got multiple copies, and I sent them to several senators and told them that this was the kind of accommodation they were offering, and we thought they should be able to do better. So they did. And they offered us a housing allowance, so we were able to go on the economy and rent an apartment and live there. And while I was in Okinawa, we went to Hong Kong, went to the Philippines, went to Japan, and just generally had a good time traveling in that part of the world. But I didn't want to stay in the Pacific because it was too far from home. It took really a long time to get across that Pacific Ocean and then across the States to come home. So I knew that the next year the base in Goose Bay, Labrador was going to close. And so teachers were given priority of where they would like to transfer to if they were there. So I applied to go to Goose Bay, and I got a transfer there. And I was there for about 6 months, and then they kept drawing the military down. And so, of course, the kids got fewer and fewer. So then they said, well, Barbara, how about going to Norway? We need a teacher up there because our teacher quit. Too long? Okay. So, so I said, okay. I went to Norway. I spent about half a year there. And then when I left Norway, I went to England. I spent 18 years there. I traveled all over Europe. I went to just about every country with the exception of Latvia, and Lithuania, and Romania. And I traveled in every other country over there. I had good friends that I traveled with and really enjoyed it. I was able to have my oldest sister come visit me in Bermuda, and then I had Mom and my youngest sister come when I was in England, and then I had Mom and my sister again come in England, and so my family had a chance to experience some of my life in that way, and that was very, very nice. But it was all because of Govey calling the president of Southeast Missouri and getting me a place down there. And I really never will forget that. It was a wonderful thing. Thank you.